Consistent self-improvement, everybody. You are now listening to American gypC podcast. I am your host, Classic, and I'm here with my co-host,
gypC. And today we have Marques Ogden. He is a retired NFL player, an inspirational keynote speaker, executive coach, and best-selling author. Welcome, Marques.
Welcome.
How y'all doing? Thanks for having me on, Classic. Thanks, gypC. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
It's a pleasure having you. So to get started, tell us a little bit about yourself, like where you from and, how you end up in Raleigh, North Carolina, where you are.
Yeah, man, I'm from Washington, D.C. I went to Howard University. Actually, I just found out I'm going to be inducted to the Howard University's Athletic Hall of Fame, class 2022, which is really exciting because my father went to Howard. He was a Bison, and I only had one scholarship offer to college to play football, which was Howard. I jumped on it. It was an amazing, opportunity. Of course, back in the late 90s, different world, Martin, Cosby Show, Living Single. Everybody was loving Howard. So going to Howard at that time was just an absolute icon for me and my family. So it was great. Went from Howard to the National Football League, played there for almost 6 years, got out of football, struggled for a little bit. Then I got into construction in Baltimore, built this massive organization. But unfortunately, as the company grew, Classic and gypC, so did my ego. And I made some really bad mistakes. And I ended up losing my business and everything that I owned in 2013 because I made a really, really bad business decision. And I stopped treating my clients and my team like people. I was chasing money, fame, and notoriety. And as a result of that, I ended up going to a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. And then I moved to Raleigh to try to get my life started back over again.
Okay. That's a nice little journey. I guess we discussed a little bit of DC on our last recording. It hasn't been put out yet, but we also lived in the DMV. We lived in Alexandria, Virginia for a year, inside of DC around the Fort Totten area for about a year. And then we were back in Alexandria for about a year. So for someone like you that was raised there, give us a little bit of your insight on what it's like being raised in a place like Washington, D.C.
Oh, man, it's great because you could go downtown and be at the White House and go over across the water and see the monuments and, so much history from Dr. King's speech. I have a dream speech that was given, in the Washington, monument area, the whole, the whole process of where that was over there in D.C. to all the memorials, the Jefferson Memorial, the Lincoln Memorial, the Washington Monument, to, all the history in downtown DC, like the Smithsonian, to the National Black History Museum. So growing up, man, in DC was great. I mean, I got the chance to, it was hard, don't get me wrong, though. I mean, I grew up in a really rough area, in Northeast, and then my grandfather lived in Northwest with my grandmother and would go to Southeast DC to do boxing training for, he was a volunteer in Girls Club for 62 years of his life, over 6 decades as a volunteer. So I spent a lot of time in that area. But, DC taught me a lot about, how to be resilient, a lot about how to live around different people. Because, again, going to high school in DC at St. John's, it was, predominantly white, and there was a lot of diversity, white, black, Asian, Hispanic descent. So I learned a lot about diversity, equity. I learned a lot about just different ethnicities, how to live and interact with different people as a result being from the Washington, D.C. area.
Okay.
What team did you play for in NFL?
So I was drafted by the Jaguars. I was Jack Del Rio, who's with the Washington Commanders as their D coordinator today. And then I went from Jacksonville to Baltimore, played with my brother who played for 12 years with the Ravens, and then went from Baltimore to Buffalo. And then I finished off my career with the Tennessee Titans.
Okay.
How was that like transitioning from football and sports to more in the business world and doing speaking engagements?
Oh, it's there's a lot of similarities, like discipline, focus, drive, hard work, reliability. But it's so different because there's not as much using your body and your brawn and your size. You have to use your mind and educate yourself. And it's a lot more strategic and tactical than it is force. When you're playing football, Of course, there's a lot of, strategy that goes behind it, but you have to use force at all times, mass and weight and velocity and strength and violence and all that goes into football.
Testosterone.
Whereas in speaking, testosterone, all that stuff. When you start talking about, speaking and all that, that's more, just, using your intellect and using your mind and, marketing yourself to be in a position to be able to successfully, become really good at your craft.
Yeah.
What made you pick constructions when you were going into business?
That's a great question. I picked it for the absolute wrong reason. I picked it because I wanted to make fast money, or so I thought. I got caught up in the big check syndrome. And, in construction, it's kind of football in a way where you get paid, it's like, it's bigger checks, but it takes a while. But, the checks could be, 50,000, 100,000, million. I mean, I've gotten checks I had checks for like, $1.5, $2 million in my business. Now, of course, I had a lot of expenses against those checks, but I was really chasing, gypC, big check syndrome. And I really didn't have a love for construction. I really didn't know construction, but I was just trying to make money. And that's exactly why we burned out, because I was in it for the wrong reasons.
Was football always a childhood goal of yours growing up, or did you have other goals and football just happened to swing in there for you?
No, I actually wanted to be an investment banker and work on Wall Street in New York when I was at Howard. I mean, you got to think about it, think about it like this way. I got one scholarship offer to play college football, one. And that was Howard University. And I was so excited to have that opportunity. But when you only get one offer leaving high school, you shouldn't be thinking about NFL or things like that. I mean, that shouldn't be on your radar. It should be getting education, focusing on your craft, and then figuring out what's going to be your next play. And so for me, that was finance. And I worked for Merrill Lynch in their Washington, D.C. office right around the corner from the White House. And I interned there when I was in college. And I loved it. And that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be an investment banker and work on Wall Street. But I got really good at football, probably about, I'll say, going into my third year. I was an all-conference as a sophomore. Then I blocked the guy my sophomore year who was like, led Division I AA in sacks. He had like 15 sacks going to our game. I held him to none. And people started saying, "Oh, Marcus, you're on potential radar for opportunity." And that's when I said, okay, fine, I'll play my junior season and see what happens. And then, everybody said, "Hey, Marcus, coming into this last year, you're on people's draft boards, you're in draft books, you have opportunity to be, drafted if you have a good season." So I went all in. I hope people on the podcast are listening. In life, you only get a few really big opportunities, I believe. And so I had that opportunity and I just went all in and I just focused on finishing up school, football, training, and, by the grace of God and a lot of hard work, the Jaguars saw enough in me to draft me in 2003.
Nice. So is the Wall Street banker dream still alive there, or?
Great question. No, that's long gone, man. But I actually tried to revive that when I came to Raleigh in 2013. I worked for Merrill Lynch for a short time in their PMD, like their training program. And I was out there trying to hustle and get in front of people and trying to win people's trust and get them to know me and like me to work with them as a financial advisor. Problem was, guys, I forgot to study. Well, I didn't forget. It wasn't a focal point of mine. I was kind of like, oh, I took finance when I was in college. This will be easy. Yeah, no, I had been removed for almost a decade. So by the time I got into trying to take my practice tests, things like that, I was failing miserably. And that's when I ended up having to, leave because I got fired because of my own, errors and my own ego. I think I could just go ahead and just show up and pass the practice test. And it didn't happen that way.
Okay. So you said you spent some time in Baltimore and then you went to Raleigh, North Carolina. So
that's right.
You may be our third or fourth guest from Raleigh, North Carolina. What was that transition like from a place like the DMV to a place like Raleigh, North Carolina?
Woo, you talk about a slow pace of life coming down here. It was like nothing to do. It was very underdeveloped. Now, where it's at today, it's much better. There's a lot more things here. Downtown Raleigh has always been nice. The outskirts have been a little behind the times, but they've done a nice job. Like, we're actually in a new development. It's less than like 2 years old. We just built this really nice, 3,000 square foot home here in Apex, North Carolina, outside of Raleigh. And it's awesome because, if you want glitz and glam and a little bit more fast paced, you can go to Raleigh. If you want real like downtown urban action, you can take a 2.5 hour drive to Charlotte. But where we're at in the outskirts, it's nice. There's no issues. It's really, kind of just quiet, and the problem with Baltimore is when I met my fiance, who's now my wife, and I had a stepdaughter, I was working a lot in downtown Baltimore, which was really not safe. I remember my fiance came to visit me, and she ended up coming up, driving, leaving her car, at my place of work. And we went out, for like an evening and all that. And then we came back the next morning to get her car from my office, and her car was stolen. I mean, it was there for an evening, nothing crazy, but, came back, boom, it's gone. And, there was a lot of problems with Baltimore at that time. It was becoming dirty. It was becoming run down, and it was becoming a place where you didn't want to raise a family. So when I lost my business, the choices were either go out to Las Vegas, where my brother was, or come down to the Raleigh area where my fiance's mom and dad were, her brother, her sister, and a lot of her friends. Because when we met on Match, and she was living in the Apex area. And then when she moved up to be with me, then when I lost the business, we ended up moving back down here to Apex to be around her family after my business crashed in 2013.
Okay. Las Vegas, huh?
Yeah, my brother's been out there. So he's 24, so he'll be 47. So it's been 23 years he's been in Vegas. He's lived out there.
Okay. So it's like a complete different polar. You got the Sin City, and then you just have Raleigh, North Carolina.
Yeah. He's like in Henderson, the vibe, like, 20 minutes from the strip. So it's not like the area, but it's like the outskirts. So we're going to move out there. But, we only knew my brother and, his wife, and I really made the move because my wife's, my fiance's daughter, who's now my stepdaughter, her cousins, and she was young, she was 8. So her cousins, friends were all here. It seemed easier for her and my fiance, I guess I keep saying my wife, to adjust. And, and versus me, so it was easy for two people to adjust a lot quicker. Mm-hmm. And I had to go through the growing pains of not knowing anybody, learning. And, I'm like, well, Marcus, if they feel secure and safe in the area, then it'll be easier for you to adjust than them trying to go out to Vegas where you're safe and secure in the area, but they don't know anybody. And if it doesn't work out, then, it's like she's not close to her family. So it just made more sense for me to be the one to have to, make the harder adjustments. That's how we came to the Raleigh area.
Nice. So I guess even after playing a defensive position in the NFL, you looking at one of the scariest people, big guys in the eyes, and you just got enough strength, and you're fearless enough to defend that. Going into inspirational speaking or public speaking, one of the number one fears in the world, next to dying almost. What was your transition like for that? Or what inspired you to really get into that?
Well, a good question. So when I got into it is because I ended up, having a spoiled milk, rock bottom moment of clarity where somebody's trash, rotten meat, nasty protruding garbage got over my body, my skin, and my clothes when I was a custodian. And that was my wake-up call. And it made me realize in my life, there was no accountability, which is an internal promise to yourself to do what you need to do to be successful. There was no responsibility, which is an external promise to others to help them achieve what they want in life. And because of that, that's why my life basically crashed. That's why my business failed. It wasn't my business partner. It wasn't the developer. It wasn't the contractor. It wasn't my employees. It was Marques Ogden who let himself down. And once I had that realization, that's why I said I need to go into speaking to help others succeed where I failed. And when I started, I sucked like anybody else that starts. I had to humble myself. I was at the complete bottom. And for 2.5 years, not one paid job. And I finally got my first paid job April 2016. So next month, it'll be 6 years since I got my first ever paid job as a speaker. And in that time, in the last 6 years, we've worked for 35 Fortune 500 brands as a speaker. We have written 4 books, 3 are bestsellers. One has not come out yet. It'll be coming out probably about another month. Hopefully that'll be a bestseller. Hopefully become a 4-time best-selling author. Coach, consultant. We have a podcast, the Levin Marcus Show. And really, we just like to align with certain brands that, we feel are a good fit. So basically, starting the speaking journey was hard. It was arduous. It was scary. I look at some of my old photos and not a lot of video because at that time I really wasn't doing that. I should have been, but I couldn't afford it. I have a couple of very, let's say, low quality videos of me speaking, and I can easily tell how bad I was between the stutter, the stammering, the ums, the ahs, all those things that if you want to be the best of the best, you can't do. I was doing all of those. And over time and over practice and over, just getting better at my craft, here I am today working. I'm always working to get better, always trying to improve my content, always trying to work on my stuff, doing as many podcasts as I can, getting out in front of the right audiences. You never know who might hear your message. But again, it was hard to get started in speaking, really hard.
What are some tips that you use, or some of the routines that you do before going into your speech to help you kind of calm down, or to at least to help you, build up some confidence?
At this point in my career, I don't have to do that anymore.
Okay.
But when I was going through it, what I would try to focus on trying to find, and I still do this to this day, but I don't really worry about things like I used to. I try to find one person in the audience that I can tell is super engaged, or a few people. Like I spoke at a big conference in San Diego about 2 weeks ago. There was about 1,000 people that were there for it was the largest finance-based state conference in California, the California Society of Municipal Finance Officers. And I was their closing keynote speaker. And I thought I was going to have to go for about 45 minutes to an hour. I had to go for 90 minutes. No Q&A, no audience interaction, just 90 minutes, me holding that stage. And you can't come up short, because I got that job through a bureau. Mm-hmm. And the worst thing you can do is get a job through a bureau and come up short 10 minutes, 5 minutes, because they're paying you for that time. So I started at 10:30 a.m. Pacific, had to go to 12 p.m. Pacific. I finished at 12:01. And that was my longest speech so far today. And you know what? I was a little nerve-wracked. I'm like, man, I got to go for an extra double my time, almost 45 minutes, almost double my time. But what I did was I just focused on more stories that related to the topic. And I found people in the audience I could tell were super locked into what I was saying. And I acted like I was having a conversation with those people, and everybody else kind of faded into the background. And by the time I was done, hour and a half later, I had many people come up to me and say it was awesome and this and that. And, that's kind of something I still do to this day.
Okay. I've never actually thought about, I guess, the business of being a keynote speaker, or even rules. Like you said, one of the worst things to do is to come up short on your speech. Are there what are some of the other, things that you learned for like beginner speakers? I'm not a beginner speaker, but just for beginner speakers, like something like that. 'Cause that's something I had no idea quite about, or it was just so,
the biggest thing I'll tell a beginning speaker is they must know exactly what the client has paid you to come and talk about. Mm-hmm. If you don't stay on topic to what the theme of the conference is, you're in trouble. And that I learned the hard way. Did my first corporate job for a Fortune 500 brand, and I bombed it because I didn't know how to stay on topic, and I didn't understand what the audience wanted to hear from me. And then I got feedback from the client who hired me. They hired me again 6 months later for another similar type of an event. And then I crushed it because I was able to understand how to relate my story to the topic. So if you're a beginning speaker listening to this podcast, understand and be crystal clear on what the client wants from you to speak on. Because once you have that, then everything else can just work its way down the line.
Appreciate that.
You mentioned a few times you had a failing business. What are some things you wish you would have knew that would help other people that are going through the same situation?
I wish I would have learned how important it is to listen to your trusted team. When you pay people a salary and you don't listen to them, you're wasting payroll. And that was my biggest thing. I was wasting payroll because my experts, my top tier employees were trying to express to me the potential issues and trouble that was coming down our path. But because I was so ego driven and so focused on my own success and money, I didn't listen. And a leader who does not listen is a leader who is setting themselves up for failure, AKA hard learning lessons. And I went through it. And I have a saying now, when you lose everything, like I did, you learn to appreciate everything. Because it took me 5.5 years to build that 8-figure business. It only took me 90 days, 3 months to lose it all.
So when you are at rock bottom, what are some things that got you through to get out of it?
That's a great question. And what I tell everybody is the following, is I had to focus on my strengths and remember what I was good at. Once I remembered what I was good at, I could then rebuild the foundation of my life. One of the best quotes I ever heard was from J.K. Rowling, is that rock bottom is the foundation that she rebuilt her life on. Same thing for me. That moment as a spoiled milk, moment of clarity, going through it at that time, custodian, was my rock bottom moment. And that rock bottom moment has been the foundation that I have rebuilt my life on. Again, what's that, 9 years ago? That's about 8.5 to 9 years ago, September 2013. I'm filing a bankruptcy, couldn't file it because I was so broke. I'm trying to pay it off. I'm making $8 an hour. I have, we don't own anything. We own a very cheap, super expensive interest car that we bought, a Nissan Altima, paying like 30% interest because my wife had filed a bankruptcy and I was so broke I couldn't even file mine. Didn't own a home, didn't own any assets, didn't own jack. And, as a result of that, I had to get my life back on track. So, the rock bottom moment that I went through in September 2013 has been the foundation I've rebuilt my life off of.
Okay.
How did you go? What inspired you to start a podcast?
I wanted to start the podcast to give content to people who couldn't afford my coaching or my high ticket speaking, but still wanted to learn information, and also start the podcast to get amazing guests to share their amazing stories. And as a result of that, it turned into something really spectacular. We're globally ranked in the top 1.5% worldwide after only 6 months. We've been out on all platforms now for a little over 8 months, but we got into the top 1.5% worldwide about 2.5 months ago. We've interviewed some phenomenal people. Michael Strahan, we interviewed him last week. His episode came out yesterday on all podcast platforms. It's awesome. He was great, and people love his stories, and that's going to give us so much more credibility in what we do because he's so successful, he's so busy, and he rarely has time to do anything other than what he does with Good Morning America, to going to space and being a great father. but he took 30 minutes of his time and he showed up early to be on our podcast, which speaks volumes to the type of people that think highly of our product and our brand. So I started this, and which is me and my co-host Leverett, because we wanted to help people and give them content that they could absorb and digest in a very easily, very simplistic fashion through the messaging of the show.
Congratulations on the success of that.
Yeah, congrats.
Thank you. Thank you.
How has your business been impacted over the past 2 years with the whole pandemic and everything?
Great question. We had to pivot. One of the best ways a leader can lead through change is having the ability to pivot when times call for it. So we went to more virtual talks, and we went to more consulting, doing things like using Zoom a lot, Google Meets, GoToMeetings. And very fortunate for us, we were able to make that pivot quickly, and we did not get hurt too bad in the pandemic. Now we're doing good this year, but I'm very cognizant of what's going on with war, inflation, issues. So, I put some money away because, I'm very aware, and I know that some things might be a little bit slow or stalled. We're getting back to in-person meetings, which is awesome. Like in February, I was in Cleveland, Ohio, Washington, North Carolina, San Diego, California, and Austin, Texas, all in the month of March. Next month, I'll be in Omaha, Nebraska, then on vacation, then a job in Charleston. Then the month after that, I'll have a job that's in Orlando, and then I'm going to Charlotte. So it's getting better, but I'm recognizing that things are a little bit stalled now. COVID kind of linger post, but also, the war and inflation and, just things that aren't in our control. A lot of change, which I tell people is external facets you can't control. That's what's going on right now. So I'm very aware, very cognizant, and our team is trying to do a lot more media, podcasts, trying to make ourselves, people see us as a individual or a brand that has some sort of, authoritative position to be able to help get you going or inspired. Because right now, if you don't do that, I feel it's going to be hard, because just with everything going on around the globe, we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. We just don't have any idea.
With cryptocurrency being a part of the future of our lifestyle, have you tickled around in the cryptocurrency department, and how do you implement that into, I guess, motivation or speech wise for future?
Great question. I'm actually going to be brought on as a chief networking officer for a crypto hedge fund, and I've dabbled in it. I understand. I actually am out talking to someone about doing some NFT work potentially. Okay. So I'm very open to multiple streams of income. We get paid for speaking, coaching, consulting, being an author. We get podcast sponsors. We get paid to be a brand ambassador. We get paid. My wife ghostwrites books. So we have many, and then of course looking at NFT, crypto. So we've got about, I myself have about between 8 to 10 different revenue streams, because I understand that, things can be different in that regard.
Okay. And we lost your face for just a little bit.
I'm right
there.
here.
I still hear your voice though, but yeah, we're not, okay. Yeah, it's just, you're not on the screen, but it's okay. We'll continue.
All right. I'm right here. Sorry about that.
No, it's no problem. But yeah, crypto is definitely something that is moving along with everything else that we have going on with the changes in the world. So it's definitely something that I see being talked about more with, I guess, motivational speeches and things like that in the future.
What are you doing with NFTs, if you don't mind me asking?
Oh no, we're looking at it. We're trying to see what we're going to do. Someone approached us actually today about it, so we're going to investigate and see what that's going to transpire, and we'll kind of go from there. We're not really sure yet, but we're going to take a look at that sometime next week to see if that makes a good fit for us.
Nice. Okay. So, Do you see yourself staying in the Raleigh, North Carolina area for a long time, or you see yourself moving around as you continue to do speeches?
No, we're gonna be in Raleigh for a while. I mean, it's my daughter is looking to go to college here. My youngest is 7, so we're gonna be in this area for a while, without a doubt.
Okay, yeah, I'm originally from Mississippi, so I it's a similar.
Oh yeah. Similar way of life for sure.
Yeah, definitely similar way of life. And one of my best friends used to live in Raleigh. He was the first one that actually moved there, and I learned about Raleigh. And it's funny, it keeps coming back around. I can tell. I'm guessing probably 5 to 10 years from now, Raleigh probably is going to be a lot more popular than it is right now.
Oh, it's growing and booming, man. Every which way you can think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know the tech industry is picking up over there.
Yeah, for sure.
But before we get ready to close it out, is there any links or that you'd like to leave for our guests, or any upcoming projects that you're working on that you'd like to let them know about?
Yeah, they can reach me at our website, www.marques, MARQUES, Ogden, OGDEN.com, or they can shoot me an email at marques@marquesogden.com. Reach out to us, connect with us, get in touch with us, and we look forward to connecting with you and having a conversation.
Definitely. I appreciate your time and consideration, and you dropped a lot of jewels on us in a pretty quick amount of time. And we always invite guests in, as far as if you're ever in the LA area, please feel free to come by for an in-studio recording session, and we can sit down and have another conversation.
Look forward to it, man. I do a lot of work in LA, so I'll be definitely hitting you guys up when I come that way.
Okay. Yeah, we're in downtown LA, so for the future, yeah, just
outstanding, man. We'll be doing some work together for sure.
Okay. Thank you to our guests for listening. To our audience for listening, for all our listeners.
You can find the podcast at AmericanGypC.com, and you can find consistent self-improvement merch at luamlee.com. And we have music.
We also have music under Classic Carpenter. That's KlaccicCarpenta. That's some, cello music, a little vocal, some instrumental stuff. We also release American Gypsy soundtracks, some instrumental that we have some instrumentals along with our YouTube channel. So definitely check out the YouTube channel as well. Thank you again to everybody for listening. Consistent self-improvement, and peace.
Peace.